Moving on to the next segment is going to be, touching on, strategy, leadership, and culture. With culture being at the center. Culture is often a misunderstood word, and what Prabir is going to try to do is try to demystify culture as it intertwines with leadership and with strategy as far as it relates to your businesses. Prabir Jha is an alumnus of Stephens College, Delhi, and XLRI Jamshedpur, and currently is the founder and CEO of Prabir Jha People Advisory. Prabir Jha has his first 10 years was as a civil servant, where he was part of the Indian Ordnance Factories, and after 10 years of being in the civil service, he switched over to the corporate world, where he spent his first stint with Thermax and with Tech Mahindra. After that, Prabir was the global CHRO at two NYSE-listed Indian companies, Dr. Reddy's and Tata Motors, after which he was the group CHRO at Reliance Industries. He is probably the only HR professional in our country today who's been the head of HR across two NYSE-listed companies. Prabir, over the last many years, has been featured in the list of most admired HR professionals in India and has a number of awards to his credit. He was awarded the Asia HRD Award for Outstanding Contribution to the Field of Human Resource Development. He was named the Digitalist of the Year and has been recently ranked number one amongst the top HR influencers on Twitter from India. He sits as part of a New York-based think tank of 15 global CHROs called as the Thinking Ahead Group. Prabir is widely recognized as a transformation guru and an accomplished thought leader and tweeter, and is one amongst the widest followed CHROs in the world, with almost over 500,000 followers on his LinkedIn account. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome my friend Prabir to take us forward.
Thank you, Burjit. Thank you.
As Prabir has requested, he would love to make this session as interactive and engaging. So please feel free to stop him at any point in time and challenge him, because he's going to challenge all of you all with questions of his own. So over to you, Prabir.
Thank you. Thank you, Burjit. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Actually, I had promised not to use a deck, but the advantage and the problem with having bright kids at home is they said, Dad, I'll put together something, right? So I will inflict a few slides, but as Burjit said, stop me at any time. You don't have to wait for questions at the end. You'll still have an opportunity. I may not take all the slides. The idea is to try and dispel, and Nachiket, what a wonderful start. And since I had a sense of the dream world that Nachiket is creating for all of us, in terms of what we would like to wear, I changed the subject of my presentation. I'll weave the three issues of strategy, leadership, and culture, and the intersect. But I want to connect it with dreams. Many of us in the room are entrepreneurs, big, small, aspiring to be bigger. The big challenge is it's all about dream. How well you dream, how big you dream, how wide you dream, what nightmares you fear is what is going to actually impact if you're growing your business. And of course, if you need to grow your business to the point that Nachiket also mentioned, finally, we are in the business of people. It doesn't matter what your industry is. If you do not understand the business of people, there is no business. So I'm going to try and use this session more in terms of some perspective sharing, because people, everyone, in fact, I always joke that HR as a subject is something that from the doorman to the chairman, everyone believes they've done a PhD on. It's like me saying Virat Kohli should have played the stroke sitting in my drawing room and watching television. It's very difficult to do, right? And everyone has a point of view. And the agenda of strategy, leadership, and culture is really that way more complex as the world is getting more digital. The world is getting disrupted. Therefore, what demands does it place on leadership? What demands does it place on culture, which appears to be soft, fuzzy? So I'll try and dispel some myths about some of these very popular themes, and hopefully you'll have some questions for me and some takeaways for you that might appeal to you. This entire context, therefore, about building organizations of tomorrow or building dream aspirations for ourselves actually forces us to think about change. Whether you've inherited a business, whether you're wanting to grow a business, whether you want to start a business, one thing which is clear is you are going to be changing. It doesn't matter where you started from. Jimmy, you would agree. What you started with and where your dreams are changing. Nachiket, you just talked about what you've done so far and what else you'd like to get to. It's all about change. And change is starting with the mind. Are you even willing to understand the dimensions of change, the soft dimensions and the hard dimensions of change? You cannot dream if you do not navigate change, and you cannot understand leadership, culture, and strategy if you do not comprehend the nuances of change. And every dimension of change could be contextual. I will not have the time to get into specific details, but bear in mind whether it's your market, it's your consumer, it's your business model, it is preferences that are changing, everything is in the context of change. And strategy, leadership, and culture must respond to this fundamental reality of change, because that is something that is bound to happen. This is how London looked a century ago, and this is how London looks now. I had another very interesting slide. 1913, how the streets of New York looked, and 30 years later, how the main street of New York looked. It had only horse-drawn carriages, one automobile in 1913. It was just the other way around 30 years later. We live in 2022. The rate of change is far more dramatic. And therefore, the demands that are there for you on your strategic thinking, on your leadership, and the culture that you seek to create, challenge or change, has to be therefore exponentially sharper. You do not say, this is me, and for the next 50 years, this is how it'll be. That world is dead. It is scary, but if you're in the world of business, if you're in the world of building possibilities and opportunities, imagine that even 100 years today will be changing many, many times over. I have picked some tweets from because I tweet and I write almost every day and post on social media. So I've randomly picked some things. My fundamental premise of why this intersection of strategy, leadership, and culture in an ever-changing world does not play out as well as many entrepreneurs and business leaders would want is because they are still trying to solve a pediatric problem with a geriatric solution. And I have an IP on this. I mentioned this to one of my very large employers once, that your fundamental problem is not that you don't understand technology or engineering, you don't understand your consumer. That's your fundamental problem. And it is the arrogance of living in a world which is dead. And that is why I talk about my friend, Icarus. So many of us who know Icarus, he was a mythological character. He had waxen wings. And he realized that when he flapped his wings, he went higher. So what would any person do? Flap still again. And you go higher, flap again. Till you get so close to the sun, as Icarus discovered, his waxen wings melted and he dropped dead. So the point that I'm emphasizing, and all of this is setting the context of how your strategy thinking will need to evolve, is past success does not guarantee future success. Don't overdo what has got you thus far. It is a trap. And the challenge of success is people around you continue to make you believe that this is the way to go. It is lonely at the top. So many of you who are CEOs and business leaders, you would realize this. And when I coach a lot of chief executives, one question I always ask, who on your leadership team challenges you? Most of them put their spoon or fork or knife down. And this is the challenge why cultures get very sterile, why strategy gets a little obsolete, and why leadership becomes leaders. In fact, in one of the articles I wrote, the challenge with the subject is we talk more about leaders and very little about leadership. And it's a big, big difference. In today's world, you cannot be the prima donna of all the thinking, doing, and being. If you're the leader, you're the big guy, of course it has a huge implication. But it is a myth today to believe you decide leadership. And companies mirror the leader from top to the bottom. And that builds sterility. And that is why the question about fashion. The leader is in fashion today, but the leadership may be actually out of sync of your context. So that's very important. So think different, do different. Am I connecting? Does it make sense with your context? Yeah? Thank you. And please challenge me, stop me anytime. The best of institutions can only be a relic to learn lessons from, unless you renew and reinvent. So it's not just about starting and creating. You also renew yourself if you're 5 years old. 10 years old, you reinvent yourself. You don't wait for 50 years anymore. Structure, talent, culture, and leadership. There is nothing that is beyond question if you want to survive and sustain. These are simple words, but each is a subject by itself. I've had people ask me many a time, Prabir, when will we stop tweaking? When will we stop making changes? I said, let the consumer guarantee me the next 10 years. I will not change anything here. But if the consumer is not willing to guarantee me my tomorrow, everything is subject to change. And that is why strategy is a very, very double-edged sword. Because there was a time when you said strategy and tactics are two very different things. Today, part of your tactical response has to come from very agile strategic thinking. And I'll talk about that in just a while. So first, let me talk about culture. Many people think culture is that soft, fuzzy, nice thing, right? People say, "Mera culture bahut acha hai, unka culture acha nahi hai." It's a good culture, bad culture. I don't agree there is a good or a bad culture. Culture must be what is strategically relevant and aligned. If it is not aligned to your strategic intent and purpose, I don't care what that culture is. It's a misfit. So the biggest myth around cultures is if you're soft and cuddly in a nice teddy bear environment, it's a great culture. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But let me explain to you at least my view and philosophy of culture. To me, culture is nothing but how we think, behave, relate, and deliver products, experiences, services that create impact for whoever your audience. So it's think, behave, relate, and do. It is all. It is just not about the little things. It's not about, free pizzas or Cokes in your office. It's a lot deeper than that. So there is no good or bad culture. There is no culture which is just about one dimension of behavior only. It is also the way you think. The problem with culture starts when you don't even get your thinking right. Because we don't understand culture. It seems that it's very flaky. It's very soft. Each one can interpret culture in the manner that they want. But culture is, in fact, I don't even know whether culture eats strategy for breakfast. It does it for lunch and dinner as well. I don't even personally, I've debated this, I don't even think culture flows as a footprint to strategy. Culture is a choice of strategy. When you do your strategy offsites, I tell boards, I said, if culture is going to be a discussion some other day, some other time, you're losing the plot even before you've got it hatched. It is a choice of strategy. And why leadership? And I loved when Burzen proposed this subject. Leadership or leaders are the custodians of culture and strategy. And the ball can get dropped in any of these three circles. It could be the way leaders behave, think, or do. It could be the way the culture is relevant or irrelevant in your context today. And of course, your strategy. I mean, you cannot be so intellectually committed to your strategy that even if the world has changed, you will say, I will continue to pursue a strategy. You're a fool. You're not strategically thinking clear. Right? And that's why it's so important to understand culture. And I'll make a few more comments on culture. But culture is really about aggregation. And if any one of you read my article in the Times of India last week, I talked about the ABCDE of leadership. And A was aggregative, the power of aggregation. And as leaders in this room, your job is to make sure that people believe in the power of shared goals. And I will also make a mention in the same breath. I believe the world has come where you will need to atomize almost individual choices for every person for your culture to be relevant.